sun stares into the mirror of my flesh and reflects melanin. Each day I awaken my black skin, I stand at the gate of this heaven. As the world watches in envy, for they know they are unable to carry this weight, to carry a world on their backs, to build cities from dust and blood and bone and rhythm. We made meals of scraps and ways out of no way, singing freedom songs in the ear of your Holocaust, setting cities on fire with cries, like Babylon burning in three-part harmony.
My African progeny of whip and chain, ship and slave, I say, from a space of grave dismay, that we are dazed and confused, astray and bruised. Here in America, there has been repeated attempts to knock us unconscious. We have been seeing stars for as long as we have been seeing stripes. We have been receiving scars for so long. Damn near every inch of our collective black body is covered in wounds. Severance of family, community, self-respect, and trust. Our many heads, our limbs, crippled and separated. To be remembered, to be membered again, reassembled as a breathing unit requires first to remember.
Saturated with the blood of ancestors long forgotten. It is through the agony of their despair that we exist. They knew not who we would be, would continue to fight on our behalf, giving birth to new warriors with every battle, living through hell so that we could prevail. To not acknowledge them would undermine the magnitude of their sacrifices. We must love them enough to heal ourselves and to finally lay waste to the vestiges of our Maafa. We must reconnect to a truth that precedes our captivity and move ourselves forward into a new reality. For the millions are screaming out, hoping that we would hear them. Therefore, dear, dear family, us as we raise our voices to call their names.
Breonna Taylor.
Ahmaud Arbery.
Tamir Rice.
Botham John.
Sandra Bland.
Yusef Hawkins.
Elijah McClain.
Eric Gardner.
Mike Brown.
Kai Gurley.
And George Floyd.
And to pay homage to generations that span a millennium. Let us honor the lives, the spirits, and the legacies of our beloved ancestors, and remind one another that they did not die in vain. For their spirits cannot be at peace until we do so. And as we commit to this ritual, to put off falsehoods and to speak truthfully to one another, we remember that we are all members of one body, and that this body is on the verge to our reawakening.
Ashe. We are on the verge of our reawakening. Even now, as we are at the crossroads, God and the ancestors are moving us to a better place. Let's thank God this afternoon for a powerful morning together. I want to just give recognition to our Maafa ministry. You just witnessed a portion, an excerpt from our film, Maafa the movie. You can actually see that on YouTube, our YouTube channel, and view that. It is about an hour long, and I think you will find it a blessing. So again, thanks be to God for our Maafa ministry. For those who are interested, there's a QR code outside in the lobby. If you want the bios and the program information, QR code will give that to you, and you will be able to follow along with all of our events and activities this week. So we're ready for our Mbongi session. This is the opportunity for the community to weigh in and to bring solutions. We're not going to do this thing. You know, you've been to those conferences and those events where everybody just complains. Nobody has a solution. Everybody has a complaint. You've been to those sessions where people, you say, give me your question. And you're wondering, when are they going to get to the question? Well, we're not going to do that this week. We want to believe and own African agency. That is, the answers are already within us. And part of our problem is we're looking outside of us for answers, but we already have answers. I just want you to look at somebody next to you. You may be looking at an answer. You may just be looking at an answer right there. Sit next to an answer. You didn't even know it. You didn't even know it. You just sat next to an answer. The answer's right next to you. And so you say, but wait a minute, if they have the answer, but they're looking at me, right, you have the answer too. And so our facilitator this afternoon, Dr. Natahsa Thornton, is a teacher, educator, and an educational consultant who is passionate about supporting educators with developing and strengthening culturally responsive beliefs and practices. She is the founder of Thornton Educational Consulting, where she develops professional learning experiences and curricula resources that highlight Black history and culturally responsive literacy instruction. As a consultant, Natahsa has designed fellowship grant programs, online courses, professional development, and coaching models for organizations. Previously, Natahsa served as an assistant professor at Kennesaw State University, as well as a professional liaison of diversity and co-founder of the Black Teachers Matter student group. She has presented her research at the international and national conferences, and has authored and co-authored articles in various journals. I'm going to stop there and encourage you to take that QR code and read all of the bios of all of our speakers. I'm excited because in this segment, we get an opportunity to move to solutions with people who have programs and practices that we can learn from. And so today, I'm excited to present to this campus, St. Paul community, and St. Paul Nation, Dr. Natahsa Thornton.
Good afternoon, St. Paul. Good afternoon. Okay, y'all. I am so full right now in this moment. What I've experienced here since yesterday, and I've shared this with a couple of people, I've never seen this before. When we talk about learning who we are, when we talk about tapping into our identities and our ancestral lineage, if it don't come from the church, y'all, where can we go? So what Pastor Brawley, what your church community is doing, it is so important, it is so imperative, and it's so needed, and I am so thankful. Like, I can't explain how grateful I am to be here. I told Mama Itahari, I was texting my mama yesterday, I said, you coming next year. This is for us, this is for us. And so I'm so thankful to be here. And y'all are just a beautiful congregation. Everybody that I have encountered is so loving and sweet and kind and insightful and thoughtful. And I'm just thankful to be here. And so I'm excited to be here to engage with you all in this conversation, in this Mbangi. As Pastor Brawley said, we're not just, coming bringing our issues, our concerns, but we're bringing solutions. And so in this Mbangi, the conversation is weaved through. We'll have a couple of points for reflection to kind of get us to really thoughtful insights about the issues and the solutions. So we'll have multiple times during this conversation to engage. And so we're going to focus around the divisive concepts law. And you may say, well, I'm not a teacher. I may not be a parent, or my kids are grown, or I'm, not even a student. But anti-Blackness is threaded in the divisive concept laws. It's embedded in these policies that are, being put forth in education in schools now. And what we know is that what is happening in schools and educational policy is just a reproduction of what is happening in society. And so that anti-Blackness is threaded in society and the schools. And so this conversation is important for all of us. And it's especially important for community, especially a community like St. Paul that is just with it, with supporting and bringing healing to the community. And so the purpose of this Mbangi is, and just to reiterate, is to center the voices of the community. Yes, using the words wisdom is inside of us. The purpose of this is to draw on our history of individual and collective action. We've talked about it. We've, seen it for the past couple of days. We have been doing this work. Our ancestors have always done this work, so we're drawing on that. And just reminded that we hold the wisdom, we hold the ideas and the strategies and solutions that we need, each and every one of us. And so I want to start with, next slide. This is Maafa. Mama Itahari said this morning, it didn't end with the Emancipation Proclamation. It didn't end with the Civil Rights Law. We are seeing it and experiencing it today in the 21st century. And what it looks like is the Divisive Concepts Law. It looks like banned books written by Black authors for Black children, telling Black stories, teaching of our Black excellence and wisdom. It looks like the whitewashing of history that says enslaved Africans were workers, that there was benefit from the institution of slavery, that, our people are better for it, right? Those lies that are being told and centered. It looks like the anti-CRT rhetoric, right? That noise, that saying this is being taught in school and to young children, elementary, middle, high school children, that's bullcrap. CRT is a theoretical framework that's taught in graduate school. It analyzes racism in society, but I didn't learn about CRT until I was in my doctoral program. So for there to be so much push and angst against CRT, saying that it's being taught to young children, there's a reason for that, and it's built on a lie. But there's so much attention given to that. It's a disruption. It's a disruption. And so with the divisive concepts law, I just want to talk about this for a second. There are 25 states, right, that have passed a law that says if you talk about race, if you talk about gender identity, if you talk about the United States institutionalizing racism, then that's divisive and you can't teach those topics, right? In 17 states, there has been a bill put forward, but it was either, it didn't move forward, it was vetoed or what have you. But let me tell you something, and New York was one of those states. And most times when states have put forth the law and it was vetoed, in that next legislative cycle, it's coming back up. So there's still work to do in our community, work to do in the state of New York. And so this is Maafa. It's not something long ago. This is the legacy, right, of Maafa. A disruption. Next slide, please. And so when we think about that, we think about what that Maafa is and what it looks like in educational laws, policies, and practices. What comes up for you? Let's take a moment to reflect. When you think about the banning of books written by Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, Kwame Alexander, books that were key to us learning and growing and thinking about our identity and developing in those ways, right? When you think about your child or your grandchild or cousin or neighbor going to school and being taught that slavery was good, I get angry. I get upset. There's something in me that says, we can't do this, and there's something I gotta do. So I want us to take a minute as a part of this Mbongi session. What comes up for you just thinking about that disruption to our children and our teachers? What do you feel? What do you wonder? What do you hope for? And I'd like to hear about maybe 3 or 4 people who would like to reflect, 3 or 4 audience members. Okay, thank you.
Just retired this year. And for me, that line there, the laws, the practices, the policies, all of us have seen the news of officers handcuffing our young babies, right? And we immediately say, oh, that's bad. And it is bad. But what we're not understanding is the laws and policies. For example, I worked in a school that was low performing, so we have a lot of differently abled children there that they label, right? So when these children have meltdowns, there is one guidance counselor for a population of 500 students. One, okay? Then there's one nurse if she's present in the building. Then you have administrative staff, principal, assistant principal. There are no deans in public schools. So what I'm saying to you is there's no one trained in the building to handle a meltdown. So because of that, the only alternative to control, again, laws, policy, and practices, the children, is to bring in law enforcement. And that's not just in New York, it's all over the country, especially in our communities. What's the solution? The solution is that we, as able-bodied parents, guardians, adults, must make ourselves available to your local school as a volunteer. I served 15 years in my building as a paraprofessional. I alone, I'm literally saying that, I alone broke up every little gang that formed in the school, every little posse, every little bullying, all of that, just by making myself available.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity and space to reflect. I'm thinking about practices as benign neglect. But now you're bringing up, even in this state, that we're moving now to laws. So in this particular district, it has come to my attention that I believe there's only one school that's teaching African American history in this district, which has also been dubbed an educational dead zone. Also, it is at the bottom of all of the academic indicators for success. I'm wondering about the correlation between the two. The fact that we're not teaching our children a sense of identity and meaning making, and we're attempting to teach cognitive skills and abilities, but they don't know who they are, it's impacting how they show up. And then we're blaming our children when they don't have the skills and the nurture and the community to help them become who they're supposed to become.
It's an interlocking system, right? That's how it was designed historically, and it's being played out now. Thank you.
What comes up for you when you think about these laws, policies, and practices? What do you feel? I feel sad. What do I wonder when there's going to be any change? And what do I hope for? Justice.
Thank you, Ashe. And so in each of these responses, thank you all for reflecting and sharing and processing. We have to process this to move through into the solution. So this is part of the processing. And we are getting to the solutions. We'll talk a bit more about that toward the end. But the solutions are layered. It's availability. It's policy and practices, right? Connecting to policy, seeing what's happening at that level. It's parents just being honest with, this is not right, and what do I do next? So thank you all for reflecting and grounding in that. Next slide, please. And we know why. Because we know, and they know, when we know who we are. When we know who we are, we walk through this world differently. When we know who we are, we walk with our heads up high. When we know who we are, we know what our interests are and who our interests are, as Dr. Kimani said. We know how to defend them, right? We know how to advance them. We show up unapologetically with our cultural wisdom, our cultural resources from mama and them, from our ancestors, from our community, from our neighbors, from our church. And we are unapologetic about that because we understand what we bring to the table and what we bring to different spaces is actually superior than what we were taught to believe as norms, right, in the status quo. And so they know that when we know who we are, we know who we are, right? And Dr. Hilliard addresses this when it comes to curriculum, and this is why there's an attack on the curriculum, because curriculum shapes identity. Dr. Hilliard says it is imperative for the curriculum we teach to support the development of purpose, calling, and belonging of Black children and educators as well. So there's why there's one school in a state that's mandated to teach African American history. There's why there's one school in this area teaching Black history, because we understand what happens when we know who we are. Next slide. And so what happens, right? What happens when our children are inundated, and even ourselves, if we think about our schooling, right? If we didn't go to an African-centered school, if we didn't go to a school, if we weren't homeschooled with that a focus on identity, these are some of the things we may have experienced and our children are experiencing now. And it's what Dr. Hilliard calls institutionalized genocide. So it's not the murdering of the physical bodies, but that is definitely can be an outcome, right? This is genocide produced by legal systems, educational systems, public health systems, and are difficult to distinguish. And it's the murdering of our mental state, right? It's the murdering of our spirit, which Patricia Williams conceptualized. She talks about the impact on racism and poverty on the human spirit, right? Those interlocking systems that come to disrupt. Patricia Williams was a legal scholar, and so she conceptualized this term. Then Dr. Bettina Love, who's an educational scholar, she brought it into the educational spaces in the classrooms. And she says that spirit murdering impacts children in school through systematic racism, the lack of inclusion, lack of protection, and lack of safety and lack of acceptance, like the fights that got to be broke up, or the police that come and criminalize children for just behaving like a child. It's when preschool students are being suspended, when it's elementary students are being denied recess, when students' language and their hair, right, are being attacked and they're being denied. And so Lamar Johnson, Dr. Gloria Boutte, and Dr. Nathaniel Bryant, they wrote about the different violences, right, that produce systemic, produce spirit murdering. And they have symbolic violence, systemic violence, linguistic violence, physical, and curricular. And curricular violence is the dismissal of Black life and experiences in curriculum. It centers Eurocentric norms, provides a false narrative about Black people. It's a dismissal and erasure of Black history, African history, and perspectives. And so this is the impact of anti-Blackness in schools that centers around the divisive concepts, laws, book banning, anti-CRT rhetoric. This is the impact of that on our children. Next slide, please. And so I want to take a second here. I live in Georgia, and so I've been doing a little bit of work around the divisive concepts law in Georgia. And so, like I said, 25 states have divisive concept laws and policies, and they're pretty much have the same essence. They're a little different. A few states have 7, some have 8. I think one has 11, but Georgia has 9. And so I want you all to take a minute, just a minute, to read through. These are deemed divisive. These are things that if you talk about in school with your children, or if your children even bring up and you have a conversation with them about things that are interesting to them, that centers their lives, that connects to their community, that falls under these divisive topics, they're gonna call you in. So take a second to look at these, and we don't have to have a mic for this. Just kind of share what comes up. Just from where you are, what do you notice? What do you notice?
I start thinking about the invisible man. Because I'm here and I can't even say anything about who I am. So it renders me invisible.
Can't talk about myself in the context of my racialized identity. What else? Race and color.
At my doctoral program for mental health, I went to Capella University. They tried to kick me out of the school because they said I was too Black, I was too Afro. And every role play that I did involved culture, involved something, trying to push the thing. And my whole thing is, we're clinicians. And if y'all are only focused on us being inferior and us not having an identity, then how are you going out there with mental health teaching people of color? How are you doing that? And I fought tooth and nail to stay in that school. because it was very important to me to have my colleagues understand that we are more than just our skin and that we created this. But their thing was, I could not be a mental health therapist. I could not be a clinician because I was too black. Nobody of color would want to come to me. When I tell you, they got together my GPA was 4.0, and they got together to kick me out of the school because of this.
That's symbolic violence, right? Coming in as yourself. Are you still in that you said you got kicked out?
I got kicked out. So
Okay.
I'm 5 credits away in my dissertation from my doctoral program, so I'm looking for another school to finish.
Okay. I'm sorry that happened, but I'm also glad it happened at the same time. Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry that happened, but it's someplace else where you have to be to do your work. Okay? We cannot be divorced from who we are. When our children show up in classrooms, right, they don't drop their race, they don't drop their culture, they don't drop their experience, they don't drop their language, they don't drop who they are. So we have to learn our children. We have to learn ourselves in order to know our children, right? Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings talk about teachers need a cultural competence, but first they have to understand themselves. They have to know their identity, right? You have to do that first before you can really teach to the spirits of black children, before you can teach to the spirit of any child. And so one thing that comes up, well, a couple of things come up, and thank you all for sharing. This is so contradictory, right? Okay. The United States of America is fundamentally racist. It's fundamentally racist. There are standards in every state where you have to talk about Jim Crow laws, right? It's in the standards, right? And so what's happening when teachers are seeing those type of things, and the issue is that they are stuck, they don't know what to do, right? It's contradictory and it's also vague. So can I read the book on Ruby Bridges or not, right? When it's a part of every curriculum, right? Every, it's vague and it's contradictory. And the issue with that is that teachers are stuck. They don't know what to do. And when you don't know what to do, a lot of times you do what? Nothing. You do nothing. Yeah, it's very confusing. And again, it was written that way, right? And so in Georgia, I've reached out to the former deputy superintendent who used to be over language arts. I've even reached out to the social studies, and I've worked with these women before in other capacities for explanations. What does this rollout look like? What are teachers being told? How are districts being informed about this? Like what is happening around here to make sure teachers can still teach children well, and there is no response, no interpretation, no explanation around any of the questions I have related to some of these bullets, nothing. And like within the past 2 years, I've worked with all 3 of those women in different capacities and nothing. And so, again, teachers are stuck, and so they don't know what to do, right? But it's not all teachers. And there's a lot of support that can be given to the teachers that are stuck, not sure. And I'm going to go there now. Next slide, please. And so, this is not new. This is not new. This is not new. We have always faced these challenges in educating our children. We have always faced policies, mandates that didn't allow black teachers to show up as their full selves, and therefore denying black children to show up as their full selves. We've always faced this. I think Mama Itihar, I don't know who was talking about it this morning. It must have been you, about the schools that were started, right, for black children and even some enslaved black children. So even then, there were laws. If you were taught to read or somebody taught you to read or you learned, taught yourself, yeah, you risked your life, right? So we've always had these laws that we had to fight against. And so, again, we are not new to this. This is just a snippet of a couple of Black educators who knew that their destinies, who knew that their identities were tied up and connected to their futures. Let me say that again. They knew their destinies, their futures were connected to the destinies and futures of their children. So they knew that I'm not teaching just a skill, but we're gonna teach mastery, right? We're gonna teach the skills. We're gonna teach, develop the knowledge, support them in that ways. But we're also touching their spirits. We're also bringing in social political consciousness. I'm also teaching them how to live outside of this space that we're in, because Maafa, right, is out there. Next slide, please. And so again, we are not new to this. We are very true to this. Here are a couple of things that have been researched just across the decades from Black scholars, Black historians, around characteristics, themes, and principles that Black teachers possess and have inside of them. Just like Mama Itihara talked about today in the African-centered schools that she evaluated, they noticed what was coming up, right? And that's how they got to the intent and mastery. And so this is very similar to that work. And here are some of the scholars that have researched this, and these are some of the themes that have come up that Black teachers embody, right? Critical care and love, racial identity, liberation and socio-political consciousness, high expectations, mentorship, other parenting, cultural congruency. And so let me tell y'all this, just a little bit about me. I ain't been conscious that long. It's a process, and I'm at a crossroads, right? But I'm gonna tell y'all this. When I started teaching in 2002, and I would be in front of my Black children every day at a predominantly Black school, Black teachers, I loved them, right? Like no other. I built strong relationships with their families. I had high expectations for them, right? Okay. I didn't know, but I knew we had to go deep with this stuff. I knew you had to come in here and have a love for learning. I knew you had to know yourself. But at the same time, I still had deficit beliefs about my children, right? You know, when some parents would come in and not speak what we would quote, say, standard English, I'm like, why they not code switching? This is a professional setting, right? When parents would come to, and I'm just being real, y'all, I can only know how to show up as myself. When parents would come to field day and not parent conferences, I have an issue with that. And me and some of the other teachers will talk about it, right? And so we would start judge, and even in that judgment, let me say, even in that judgment, I loved my children, you see? And so even when I wasn't fully there, this is what was inside of me. I wanted to teach where I taught because I wanted to do better for the children, for Black children. That's why I was in that space. But I still had some things that I had to work through myself. I was with pre-consciousness, like Dr. Black was saying yesterday. That's where I was. But let me say this. It wasn't until I started reading the work of Gloria Ladson-Billings, of Lisa Delpit, of some of these scholars, okay, Dr. Asa Hilliard. It wasn't until I was in graduate school, and it was a shame, because I didn't start graduate school, y'all, until I was in front of Black children every day for 5 years before I started graduate school, and the first time I had ever read an educational book by a Black scholar. I read Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings' book and Dr. Lisa Delpit book. That was the first time, and I had been in front of Black children every day for 5 years. That's a shame, and so that speaks to our teacher education programs and our changing programs. And that speaks to the institutes that's hopefully, could happen here with teachers. We have to study, right? If we don't get it somewhere else, we got to study for ourselves. And so it wasn't until I started reading about this seeing who I was, right? And I began to understand that Black language is beautiful. It's even more sophisticated than quote unquote mainstream or standard English, right? And I had no problem for the past 10, 15 years I present, I speak, I come as myself, and y'all gonna hear my Black language. I don't care who I'm in front of, right? Because I'm proud of it, because that's how I talk to my granny, right? Okay, and so one thing with these principles is that with Black educators and Black parents, right, it's inside of us. Even when we're not there, even when we don't know ourselves, because that's where I was, it's still inside of us. When I was teaching kindergarten, they wanted to do standardized testing with my students, right? Not because it was mandated, just to prepare them for the first grade. I said, we're not doing this to my 5 and 6 year olds. I'm not overwhelming them. I'm not stressing them, not at all. I took the paper, we talked about it, why they wouldn't want to do it, how it made them feel. I took it up here. When they didn't want to serve my children, I had a few students that were not reading quote unquote on grade level, that's a whole nother thing. They decided not to provide extra supports for kindergarten, but they took the kindergarten supports and gave them to 5th graders because 5th graders were taking a test. Oh, no. This is the foundation. We need extra support. So there was conversations I had to have with the assistant principal and even parents. This is what's happening. Y'all go talk to them because they're not listening to me. And within a few weeks, my babies were getting the extra support they needed. And so even when I didn't know, right, I was operating in liberation. I was operating in care and love, high expectations, mentorship, and even when I didn't know what I was doing, right? And so we've always faced this, but it's always been in us. And so now, as we continue this Mbangi conversation, I want y'all to think about, like, have these principles or things that Black teachers possess. If you are Black teachers, have you ever possessed? How have Black teachers advocated for you or your children? As a parent, how have you witnessed that? How have you experienced that? How have these principles been a thread in your work as an educator, ministry leader, parent, community member? Maybe not even being cognizant of it. How have they shown up? How have you disrupted the disruption because of what's inside of you? You come to the mic. Thank you.
I can speak pretty loud too. I'm actually the beneficiary of a principal that my dad had when he was in South Carolina, African man, Mr. Dodonna, I believe. And he just remembered, he didn't remember a lot, but he remembered that this African man was telling them, be proud of yourself, be proud of your Blackness, speak up for yourself. And so at one point, some white kid in the neighborhood was calling my dad the N-word, and my dad chased him up a tree, led to, in a short story, led to my grandfather getting fired from his work, right? Because that's the way they did things in the South, right? But then the family moved up here. My dad got a great job, went back down, bought a house. Did a lot better than he would have if he'd stayed down there, right? But the point is, the man that I met as my father had a backbone. And it was because he had a principal that told him as a little boy, be proud of yourself. So.
Ashe, thank you. Thank you, that's powerful. Anyone else experience these themes or characteristics in Black teachers, or even exhibit them in yourselves as a Black educator or parent? Or ministry leader?
Good afternoon. It just makes me think about the fact that it was an undergraduate school where I was so blessed to work with Black women who were doing the work. And I went to a predominantly white university. I went to Binghamton. but I was graced by Carol Boyce Davies, Tiffany Patterson, Dr. Opehu, who started to teach us this history so many years ago. So as I walk into a classroom, I'm in my 26th year as an educator, that's always at the back of my mind. And so the teachers look at me like, you're letting them call you on the weekend? If they need me, they can call, right? And I think that care and love, bringing that into the space, and now as an administrator, we jumped off the ledge. We're teaching AP African American Studies, right? We're a part of that pilot program, right?
Yes, Ashe.
And it's amazing. We didn't put any restrictions on the class. We put the students who were most struggling in the building, in our classroom, and we're really trying to do that work together with them.
Thank you for your work. Thank you so much. See, we true to this. We true to this, y'all.
Yes, my children went to integrated schools, but I can really say that the teachers that did the most for them were the Black teachers. They really cared about them. They were concerned about their well-being. They knew they were able and capable of doing wonderful and marvelous things. And I truly believe that if they didn't have the experience of those Black teachers in the early years, they might have fallen by the wayside.
Ashe, thank you. It's in us. It's in us. And that goes back to Ubuntu. That goes back to the Maya principles. It goes back to Sankofa, right? The ways in which we're principled, the ways in which we live, the ways in which that we love and care. That's in us. If you ain't never heard Ubuntu before, you still are a part of a community. Family is important to you. Connection is important to you. If you never heard of Sankofa before, you still picking up a book, right, and reading it to your children or reading it to your children or your students about who they are and where they come from. Thank you all. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to go through these quickly. These are just a couple of examples that just remind us that we faced divisive concepts before, right? We faced these mandates. We faced these policies and practices. And so I want to highlight the work of Dr. James Anderson. In his research, in his books, he talks about how every gap, educational gap, that Black people have faced, we collectively have disrupted and have lessened that gap. He talks about the literacy gap, right? When there were very few Black people that knew how to read and how we built schools. He talks about the high school attendance gap, how when we pushed our children to school and made sure that they attended school, made sure they graduated. And I read him when I was in my doctoral program because, you know, it's the educational gap, the test score gap. That's what it is, a test score. Like, what's happening? Why, as a teacher, I'm like, my children are brilliant. They're beautiful. They are just intellectually divine. But why do their test scores look like that? That's the question that I had as a teacher, when I didn't realize like the test score was another construct of Maafa, right? So I didn't get it. And so then when I read his work, I'm like, oh, so this gap really is make-believe, because what they're assessing us on is not who we truly are. The tests that are being administered were developed by races, right? And so with James Anderson, he talks about every gap that we face as a people, we have closed every educational gap. Next slide, please.
Can you talk about the cultural bias in tests?
Yes. So I want to say this too. And not to put in a plug, but I do have one of my books that I have here, Revolutionary Love. We walk through this in that book. We talk about the history of the bias in assessments, right? So first of all, they were developed by scientists or psychologists, and their intent, and I can't call names or what have you at this point, but the intent of those tests, and it's all in the book, is that the intent was for them to show that Black children, right, were intellectually inherent or deficient. Like, that was the aim. When we talk about intent today, that was the aim. So we're going to administer this test. And it was with students, it was it was done in the military across a couple of different populations with the intent to show that, right? And then when you have standardized tests now are based on those those cognitive tests, those historical tests that were done. And when we talk about cultural bias, we look at language, right? So we know there's a difference in quote-unquote standard and mainstream language and black language. You know, there's a difference in vocabulary. We know there's a difference in cultural reference. And so anything that is standardized to Eurocentric norms. And so when our children take those tests, there are no cultural reference, right, that they can connect to. So it can definitely be a concept that they understand and know, but based on the language, based on the syntactic form, how the system is, the sentence is set up, they will answer it incorrectly, right? And so I have two sons, 5th grader and 9th grader, and I don't know what they score on their end of the year milestone test because I don't care, right? And I tell them that. And when their teacher comes and talks to me about the standardized assessments, I thank them and I ask them, what are you observing in class? How is he reading in class? How is he able to do his math conceptually, right? Those are the conversations that I have. And if the teacher can't tell me, the next time I meet, they're ready because they've been observing, they've been taking anecdotal notes, right? And so with those assessments, there are culturally biased. They don't show what our children know. They don't show children's growth, and they don't show our children's spirit, right? Anything standardized cannot be culturally relevant and supportive of our children. So Carter G. Woodson, he talks about, so this book is Fugitive Pedagogy. It's written by Jarvis Givens around Carter G. Woodson and the work that he did to lift up Black History, to start, Black History Week, and then it went to month, and to work with Black teachers to really teach children their histories and who they are. And it's just a really beautiful text about the collective teachers coming together to do this work, to learn for themselves and teach their students. And one of the opening passages, he talks about a Black teacher, right, in a one-room schoolhouse, that the superintendent of the schools would come around to make sure that she's teaching and doing what she needs to do. And so she may have a text or a piece of paper that is focused on Black history, is focused on Black excellence, or someone they're studying that's Black. And so she has the piece of paper that she's reading from, that she's teaching children from about their history, right, about their culture. And when she knows that the superintendent is coming, or that door kind of clicks and latches open, it's inserted in her book, she flips the page and reads from the primer, right? And I don't know if you are a teacher or when I was teaching, what we would say, I'm gonna shut my door and do what I need to do. So we've always done this for our children, divisive concepts or not, we've always done this for our children. Next slide, please. And so, those are examples of we are true to this. And so I want to reiterate that, because we look at that divisive concepts laws, right? And we see it's vague. We see it's contradictory. But that is what we can't get caught up in. We can't stop there. Because when we know who we are, where we come from, and what has been done, and historically, that's connected to our lineage, that's connected to our history, where we've always taught our children what they need to teach, we can do this too, right? We've always faced this, and we've always come across. And so Mary McLeod Bethune, at her school, the Ku Klux Klan was coming, and she knew it. She sent her girls to bed. Y'all go to sleep, and told the teachers, don't say anything. I know they coming to scare. She went outside and she stood on the porch, and what? They came for a few seconds and they left. When you're willing to risk, right, your life, when you're willing to do whatever it takes, right? Is that what Pastor brought? Whatever it takes to protect children, to protect life, to protect spirits. That's where we come from, right? So this divisive concept law, it don't scare me because I know where I come from. Next slide, please. And you can continue, next slide. And so now, we've talked about the issues. We've talked about our history. So what do? Right? We've talked about some of our concerns. We have solutions inside of us. So I want you all to take a second to think about this. What is your greatest concern when it comes to divisive concept laws? When it comes to the lack of African American history being taught in the schools in your community, when it's mandated, when it's a law for them to do so? When they're banning books with our stories, with our histories, with our intellect? What is your greatest concern and what is a solution? And so we have a couple of options for you to share. If you have a phone and you want to share electronically, you can scan this QR code for Padlets. And when you scan that, you can click the plus sign at the bottom and share your concern and share your solution. We also, Mama Itahara, did you want to do the cards or what do you think?
Or if you want to address it and bring your solution, your concern and solution to the mic.
Okay. So you can address it with the QR code or kind of think about it for a second and come up to the mic. And these are some things in your solution you can consider. Like, how can teachers teach Black history in a way? In the face of this, what can we do? What are those practical steps? What are those things that we can do to teach Black history in a way? How can parents ensure their children learn true and accurate history anyway? How can educators, ministry leaders ensure Black students' racial identities and cultures are affirmed anyway? As advocates, how do we engage in advocacy to change policy about divisive concepts anyway? And so take a moment to reflect on that. And we're in the middle of a solution, y'all. This is a solution. And if anyone wants to come forward.
How can educators teach Black history anyway? I use what I call the postscript, right? So I would teach them about George Washington, and then at the end of the lesson, I would add in our existence in his time. He owned slaves. He did this and he did that. That's how I infused it.
You teach the facts. You teach the facts. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I would say I'm going to answer as an advocate, as a clinical social worker, to teach against the divisive concepts is when you start to create groups or form within community places where we can teach our history. And so it's not just because this also affects our mental health, our mental wellness. So creating groups to where we can start to talk about what that looks like. Our history embodied, which I've actually done that, and a couple of my friends have too. And then you can start to talk about Black history from our understanding, our standpoint, and pass that on to our adult clients and to the children we may see, and also to help families educate their children around Black history.
Thank you.
I wanted to add
How can educators?
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have someone? Okay. How can educators teach Black history anyway? I don't know how it is in Georgia, but in New York, teachers can take kids to museums. And I know in Atlanta, when I visit a state, I go to see what Black stuff they have in that state. So I know that in Atlanta, Martin Luther King's Center is still there. And some kids learn hands-on. So sitting at a counter and experiencing what those college students' experiences sitting at black counters in the 60s when things were segregated is a way to teach hands-on learning, and you're just planning a trip to the Martin Luther King Museum, and that's another way to teach. It doesn't always have to be in the classroom, but some of those trips to certain places and to see certain things is a teaching moment as well.
Thank you.
Two things. Educators, how can educators teach Black history anyway? One, you need to learn what your state curriculum says you should be teaching in terms of social studies or history. Many teachers are unaware because they're so focused on only standardized tests that there are curriculums that are state approved. Example, teaching slavery in the Hudson Valley is a New York State approved curriculum that I've only encountered one school that did it. When we talk about what can educators, ministry leaders do, the things that we are doing here at St. Paul was something not that is simple, the idea, but we carried it through with the Maafa Museum and making it available during school hours and encouraging our teachers, meeting with the administrators for children to come through. It was very beneficial. When they first began doing the tours for students, I know one year I brought through at least 1,000 children, and it was impactful for the children as well as their parents because they had a little pamphlet based upon their experience that they took home to share with their families.
And I'm typing up here, but I'm just typing the solutions. Thank you so much.
We can do things like go to Weeksville. There's Weeksville right here in Brooklyn. There's a whole bunch of Black history sites that they're smaller, they're trying to take from us, but they're grounded. We can do those things. We could join rites of passage groups. And as a mental health therapist, I just want to let y'all know, when your children get tested, that is not our testing population. Make sure you ask who the population was, you know, because there's no Black people in that testing pool. They used to have testing called son of a BITCH. And, you know, they base that test, that mental health evaluation on all the tests that they give our children. And that is only geared to us to be slaves, to be vocational, to be workers, low grade, not to be higher ups. So please and thank you, when you take your children to have mental health evaluations or any psychological evaluations, ask for that testing pool. Find out when they're gonna have these testings, when they're gonna do this DSM, because none of this is created for us. None of it. So we can start advocating like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And like you started, I'm definitely very full as a community member and advocate. I think we can all do something. And I'm grateful for, I think, the best educators who were my parents, and I stand on their shoulders. So wherever I go, I represent them still. I decided I stretched and became a consultant because of things that I saw while my own children were in school, and myself being a product of what I call failed desegregated busing. I knew that I wasn't gonna see it for my kids because I knew the potential. But the small things that we can do is like go back to do some things that we used to. So when our kids get out of school, right, I'm retired, I'm relatively a young retiree. So if I know that Lisa's kids come, Lisa, they can come here after school until you get home from work. Sometimes it doesn't have to be as grand as we think. It could be, I will feed them and I'll start the homework. I will give them a break. It could be these things. But this summer, I had the opportunity to take some educators from a school district here in Brooklyn on a tour, And it was amazing because we started with a film, and the film is called, what's the film, Lisa? The East. The Sun Rises in the East. That's the name of the film. And at the essence of The Sun Rises of the East, it talks about a school that grew in the 70s here in Bed-Stuy that was Black ran, and children who came up out of the East, self-determined, pillars of the community. We then did a physical tour of Bedford-Stuyvesant where these teachers taught, where I showed them the richness of that community where their students and their families come from. Because it's not just about the students, right? It's about the family. So when you get one student, you get the family. And there were so many things that they didn't know. The Weeksville was a part of that tour, and they didn't know. And Weeksville has an amazing history. So I think that if we can just do these small things, and we'll reclaim our community. You know, and I do believe that we can do it, you know.
Thank you, Ashe.
A quick solution I'll offer too is just looking out for what even some of the major institutions will be doing. So something we did in Atlanta was cancel church and took our children and our families to see the Emmett Till exhibit that's at the Atlanta History Center. And it was really thoroughly done, actually. But that's a place where normally they're not telling Black stories, but just in us keeping our ear to the ground, we found out about it from another professor at Clark Atlanta who pulled in Dr. Black and Dr. Handy, and we were able to take a group. So I think things like that too, watching the white spaces for when they get money and they do stuff that can educate our children so we can be subversive with it.
Yep, very strategic. Thank you.
Pastor, can I say something? So as far as advocates, and how do we engage in advocacy to change policy about these divisive concepts, something that has always stayed in my mind, my mother was a part of the PTA. She was the vice president. And as Tony said, sometimes we have to go back to those things, because the one thing that constantly resonates with me and has never left me is I was in the 2nd grade, and where we went to elementary school was a block and a half from the house. So we lived in a predominantly white area, and there were 12 Black families. Everybody knew each other because we were all we had. And so we would always walk to school. The crossing guard was our neighbor, so she looked out for us. We have to get back to that sense of community, because this one particular day, when we were going to school, everybody noticed our parents were going with us on a day when we normally were able to walk by ourselves. So it was a little strange to us, but again, as kids, we didn't even think about anything. We got to the school, to the front of the school, and we were locked out. I was in the 2nd grade, and up at the 3rd floor window was the vice principal. And she said, and I quote, "We have enough niggas in this school," and they would not allow us in. Our parents sent us home. We didn't know what was going on. By the time we got home and turned on our little black and white that we used our hand with, our parents had signs and they were picketing because they were gonna bust some kids in from Brownsville, and they did not want those kids in that school. So we were out of school for 2 days. But we got back in, they bust those kids in because the parents all gathered together. It wasn't about my kid, your kid, it was a communal thing. We are not gonna keep our children out of this school. And we had community babysitters. So I couldn't just act up because Ms. Brown could beat me and take me home and get another beating.
The power of community. Ashe, thank you.
I'd just like to say that for my 30 years of teaching, my disability students, I taught them through the art. For an example, you want to teach Black history, bring in some peanuts, whatever that stop sign, whatever you have, don't tell them what it is. Let them go through and experience it, and you'll be surprised. Our children are taught mostly through the art. We need to teach them the art. Yes, we can. And number one, before I go any further, before I could do any of this, God had to be in my life. And I'm sorry to say, if I know we're talking about Black history stuff, but he had to be, because I took a risk. They wrote me up so many times that there was no writing. It didn't bother me, because like you said, I had a love for my children, for my parents. See, once you got those parents behind you, and God has allowed me to see the fruits of my labor, that my last student came to me, he says, Doc, I have my master's degree. I didn't understand what he was talking about, because special needs, as they say, were never to gain anywhere. And then I had another one says, she's going on to be a veterinarian doctor. I was so, I just couldn't know how to relate to it, because I was so busy trying to put whatever I had in them to know that no one can stop you. I said, God made you, gave you a mind and a brain to think. Forget the color of your skin. You trust in him, and he will take you through. And most of my students have done that. And I just want to say, take those little children, like the elementary, the kindergarten, and teach them through the art. The teacher won't have to, the principal won't have to know about it. Teach them through the art, and you can get through that, okay? I have so much to tell. I wish I could tell you more to let you know what's going on. But right now, I had to get that out. Teach them through the art.
Ashe. And what special needs? Yeah, you special, and we're going to get this done. And special needs based on whose norms, on whose expectations. That shows that when we teach to the spirit, because this teaching is divine work, those labels don't matter. At-risk child, below grade level, no, we are not claiming that. We talked about naming yesterday. We would not name our children, we would not let those labels stay on our children, because we see just in this example the power of that teaching to the spirit and not to a label or a test score or reading level. We don't do that. We name our children and we teach them and speak to who they are. Thank you.
Can I say something?
No. I'm just playing with you, Pastor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thornton. I think we're going to have to really invoke the power of imagination. If you cannot, in this moment, build a school, curate a community. So what would it look like to organize parents? Parents are on the outside of this conversation oftentimes. And education is being done to our children and not with our parents. So I want to suggest we curate community, build community and capacity for our parents. It's already been said multiple times, but I just wanted to just emphasize it again. I think churches can step into this space. And that's partly what we're trying to do this week. And I want to say to pastors and those who will hear me, don't believe the lie that you don't have the resources. Don't believe the lie that you can't make a difference. You can, because it doesn't take much to photocopy a picture. You can use your creativity, you can use your space, and you can create your own Maafa museum. And you can curate stories that are up out of your own context. And so I just want to suggest that we may have to invoke the power of imagination.
Thank you. Raise your hand. How many parents we have in here? Parents with kids. Ashe, give yourselves a hand. We're doing the work. This is the work. So I think I've already made a comment, but I'm going to piggyback off of Pastor.
and go back to advocates. We don't know our laws. And so oftentimes, I know for me as a mental health professional, we fight with teachers that are black because we don't want labels, but we gotta learn how to work the system. So we are people of story. We are storytellers. Our people are not gonna sit down and read 400 pages of the McKinney-Vento Act. Half of y'all might not even know what the McKinney-Vento Act is. So we need to be able to do that. And for those who are advocates that work in law, work in education, work in emotional wellness and mental health services, these are things that we can do and bring it back to our people. This is about curating the space so that we can invite the parent in to learn, so that the children can actually understand what label is actually being thrown at them and how, if the label is there. If our children really need services, oftentimes I grew up in Georgia and it was that person is special. We didn't even get them help, but they might actually need that and they can actually grow in community. I've watched individuals who were labeled for special needs have masters, doctorates, and go on to become amazing individuals within our educational systems, within our medical systems. And so it's not impossible for you to become who you are designed to be, who you are called to be, but it does take community to stick together and curate conversations so that we can have understanding of laws that really are divisive and laws that are designed to keep us down. We live in a hierarchical system. We live in capitalism. Somebody has to be at the bottom, and it's always been black people. We hadn't even been fully human 100 years yet, according to the United States of America. So we really have to think about how to curate that, learn the system so that we can make this system work for us because we are here. We live in it, and we can advance and excel beyond it. We've done it 100,000 times, and we can keep doing it again and again.
Ashe, thank you. Thank you. In your wisdom lifts up community. From this conversation, your wisdom lifts up the love of our people. Your wisdom lifts up strategic actions, intent, mastery. Your wisdom lifts up the cultural dimensions of our children in which they learn their best and learn their fullest. This work happens on various levels. It happens in various ways. And one way is not better or more superior than the other because we need the neighbor that brings the children in, and we need the clinician that can read the law. We need the church that does the knowledge building, right? We need the teachers that evoke love and speak to the spirit. We need the educational leaders that are unapologetic when it comes to teaching our children. We need this work done in so many levels. We need our community. We need knowledge of ourselves. And in this space, it's being evoked. And we are there. We're getting there. It's in our wisdom. It's in your voices. It's in your ideas and solutions. We have a history of collective action. We have a blueprint. Mama Itihari talks about studying our victories, right? It's a whole lot of victories in these walls, on this hallway. Our babies were teaching us last night, and they'll teach again tonight and the next night. Those are our victories that we have to study. And the reason that is important, and when we think about these divisive concept laws, and we think about, well, who we are as Black people and Black educators. When we go into classrooms, I work with lots of teachers, lots of Black teachers. And I was one of them that loved their children, that loved, like you said, the parents call on the weekends. They going to the basketball games. They're bringing them home, whatever it takes. They tutoring them after school. They're staying late. They're speaking to them. They speak to them and name them every day when they come in the classroom. And they know the important work that needs to be done. But policies that are put out there shape mandates. Mandates shape instructional practices. Instructional practices shape beliefs. And so we become socialized, even when we know better and we know right, we become socialized, right? As parents, we can be socialized in certain ways of rearing and loving our children, and just with the intimacy and the hair braided, we've been socialized to believe that's not okay when it is what needs to be done. It is it, right? And so that's why this conversation is important, especially when it comes to teachers who may have experienced schooling like I did, where we talked about Black history during Black History Month. I don't recall reading not one novel written by a Black author when I was in high school in none of my English classes, not a one. And so when teachers, and Dr. Hilliard talks about this, the curriculum shapes the purpose and belonging not of students, but also teachers. So the reason why this advocacy work is important, and the reason we have to lift our voices, and we're going to talk about this just a second. I have some resources on this. To lift our voices, talk to principals, write letters to chancellors, to superintendents, let them know what we want, what our children deserve, because if we don't, then our teachers that know better will cycle those beliefs in those practices. So it's for our children, but it's also for our teachers, right? And their learning and understanding. And so they can disrupt, shut their door, slide the paper in the primer, because no matter what the mandate says, this is what I'm doing for my children. Next slide. We won't watch this video just for the sake of time, but this video will be linked to a set of resources. This is ASALA. This is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Their conference is this weekend, their national conference, and they are going to Jacksonville. And they have been doing a campaign of why are we going to Jacksonville, right? Why are we going to Jacksonville, where the governor is intentionally erasing, dismissing our history, our books. They're going to Jacksonville. So this is an example. You talked about organizations, Esty, right? So this is an organization that's doing the work, and they have a lot of different things on their website that talks about that. So this is one of the links. But I just wanted to lift up an organization, community. It's a community, right, that's speaking against this. Next slide, please. And then next slide. And so I want to just lift this quote: whatever is necessary is possible. You all just shared from your wisdom, from your experiences, from your spirit, what's necessary. And everything you all named is possible. Next slide, please. And so I want to share, this is a book that I've co-authored that I have out, but the key thing about this book is that it taps into what teachers believe, know, and do. How those aspects of pedagogy and teaching intersect, right? And so in that text, we talk about different ways of tapping into the lives and the curriculum and the history of Black children. And we also talk about the history, like how education was never designed for us, right? You have to know that, right? First, you have to believe in Black children. You have to understand Maafa and the system you're in, right? And then that shapes what you do for Black children. And so in some of the work that we've been doing lately, we've outlined some of that, the believe, no, do framework with the divisive concepts law, right? So even as parents, when you go talk to your teachers, these are questions that you can ask, leaders, definite leaders, school leaders. What do you believe about this? What do you know about this? What are you doing about it? Next slide, please. And so I just wanted to end with some reflection and action steps, but I want to frame it in freedom dreaming. That connects to me. I thought about it when Pastor said imagination. So freedom dreaming is a concept, it's conceptualized by Robin, I can't think of his last name, I think it's Robin D.G. Freeman maybe, but he's a Black scholar. And he talks about freedom dreaming is what do we imagine in our wildest dreams for Black people, for our community. What do we imagine our freedom to look like? If we can imagine, right, and dream of our liberated selves, our liberated spaces, our liberated communities, our liberated society, what does that look like? And so in these solutions, these are steps to your freedom dreams. Because he says without freedom dreams, we're stuck. We don't know where to go. We don't know what steps to take. St. Paul has been freedom dreaming for a long time. You all have clear vision as to where you're going, where our communities are going, where we need to be. And your solutions were rooted in steps towards your freedom dreams. And so I just want you to know that and see that wisdom and beauty that I see and heard in that conversation. It's rich, it's deep. Everything that we have and need, we got it inside of us. This is your freedom dream, and y'all are walking in it. This is our freedom dream, and we're walking in it. And just as we close, these are just some reflection questions to kind of, think about next steps, and they're rooted in your solutions. What kind of educator, ministry leader, parent, community leader, advocate do you strive to be in this current climate of anti-Blackness? And as we know ourselves and learn ourselves, there's very little uncertainty in that, okay? What steps can you take to ensure Black children learn their history and about themselves in light of divisive concept laws and related measures? Y'all already spoke it, right? And so rest in that and move in that. And I'm just excited and thrilled to see what comes out of this, what comes out of your wisdom, this conversation, this embodiment that lifts the spirit, speaks to the spirit of ourselves and our children. Because that's the spirit in which our community rests. And I want to give y'all a hand and just love on y'all and thank y'all for what you all brought today. Amen and Ashe.
Ashe. One more time. Let's thank God for Dr. Thornton today. Just a few things before we dismiss. There are additional copies of the material today. And I don't know, do you have additional materials? See?
With my company, thank you.
You're on.
Hello, can y'all hear me? I did something. Okay, here we go. So last summer, I worked with a group of 10 Black women teachers to develop stories of excellence, all classroom teachers or school leaders or instructional coaches. And so stories of excellence is a solution to what I've learned and what I've researched and what I've studied with teachers over the years. We would talk a lot about cultural relevance, and I go in and do my professional learning thing, and they would say, we need resources. What you're talking about, I didn't learn that, right? I don't understand the story of Kandake Amanarenas. I didn't know Shirley Chisholm did this. I didn't know about Hannibal Barker. And so this resource is Stories of Excellence, and it highlights, it connects to the social studies topics. Whatever social studies topics are in the standards, we pull it from that. And so we have stories that highlight those topics. This is just an example. This is Black Women in Government. Every year, children learn about the branches of government, right? And so in this, we highlight Black women, Constance Baker Motley, Shirley Chisholm, Ketanji Brown Jackson, that touched every branch of government, legislative, judicial. And so, but before we tell their stories, we start with the remembering African monarchs, because we do not start our history at slavery, right? So we start with our African excellence. So we talk first about Kandake Amanarenas, who was a queen, right, that protected her people from the Romans, right? We talked about Nzingi Mbandi. We talk about Queen Nanny of the Maroons. So they learn about these brave, courageous, fierce women that protected their people and led in love at all costs. And then we go into a story of each of those women. And my background is literacy, education. So every story is rooted in the life of the children. And so we have a life framework. L is connected to life. After they read this, and Mama Ititari was talking about meaning. This is not just skills. It's not just knowledge building, but it gets to the meaning. L in the life framework stands for life. How does this connect to my life? Teresa Perry and Dr. Hilliard, they've talked about Black children come to school and they leave, I don't care, because nothing is connected. They say, why am I learning this? Why am I learning this? So intentionally in every Stories of Excellence, students have to respond, how does this connect to me in whatever way? I is insights. What insights can I gain from this person or this topic I'm talking about? In insights, it always taps into our cultural dimensions or values of Black people, right? We've heard that Black parents and children don't care about education. Have you heard of Timbuktu? Have you heard of freedom for literacy and literacy for freedom? Right. So those are the stories that they learn from the insights part, right? We've always cared about education. That's always been central to us. So that I for insights, disrupt those deficit norms. F is family and community, right? So how does this story I'm learning connect to my family and community? What does my uncle say about Shirley Chisholm? Right, when she says she unbossed and unbossed, what does that mean to you, uncle? What does that mean to you, neighbor? And it taps into how we're always learning from our families and communities. And yesterday in a conversation around the mechanic and the PhD, wisdom in all of that. I don't care what you are. I don't care what your profession is. Yes, my dad that's a mechanic, he can come up to that school and he can teach us, right? I'm just to go personal. I have a PhD. My husband is a truck driver. He went to college for 1 year. And I can't tell you how much I've learned from him. I can't tell you how much I appreciate who he is to our children. And his degree has nothing to do with it. Right? He knows a whole lot more about me in certain things. And so F is connected to family, right? We have to bring our families into the education. We have to tap into the knowledge and the resources of family. And then E in life is the last activity is engage. How can I engage in this content in a critical way, right? What questions do I have? What opinions have I learned, and what do I want to share with others, right? Well, how does this matter to me, and how can I tap into my strengths as a writer or whatever project they choose to share this knowledge? And so this is, right now we only have 2 that are done. We're working on, we have a lot more content that we're trying to get topics out, but we have Black Women in Government and Black Excellence in World War II. And in that one, we highlight Hannibal Barker in his work as a military strategist in the Second Punic War. And so these are on sale for $5 outside. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we can get copies, $5 outside? All right, in the lobby. So we also have copies from the morning session. You can go to our fiscal office, go out all the way out the sanctuary, all the way down towards the other entrance, and you will see fiscal, and you can get copies. We have another 100 made for that. Also, just wanted to announce during the session, I received a phone call. Cynthia Nieves just talked about sending 1,000 children through the museum back in the day. Well, guess what? District 23 has called in. They want to send 1,000 children through the museum. District 19 is also similarly organizing to send all their middle school students through the museum. We're going to prioritize these two districts and then open it up for other districts with the goal of 5,000 children coming through the Maafa Museum for October. Also, I just wanted to, again, extend this opportunity, several things. Tonight, our children, again, will lead us through this museum. And how many went through, man, it was yesterday, right? How many went through yesterday? What was your experience like? Yes, I don't want to give away anything, but the opening of it is worth the price of admission. When you hear your young sons and daughters state their name, that's it right there. I am. And I am your Yara, I am your tour guide. And watch them recite their history. It will do something for your soul. That's tonight. Is that 6 or 6:30? 6. All right, we'll get here at 6. All right, 6 o'clock. And 7 o'clock in the Life Center, there's a session. It is exclusive to educators. It is a hush harbor for educators. Our teachers are traumatized because we're in a traumatic situation, a complicated situation, and we want to create safe space for you in the Life Center at 7 o'clock, and Dr. Torre and Dr. Thornton will be our facilitators for that. All right, y'all give them a hand for that. They're working hard today. Wanted to acknowledge Pastor Christian A. Smith, who's with us, just landed, and he will be our Mbonge presenter on Thursday, presenting his model. And I hope you can see the genius of this entire week. Thank you so much, Mama Etiari. So I have ideas for days. I got to be honest with you. My staff runs from me. They claim I never sleep because I always have ideas. Sometimes I need somebody to help me organize my ideas. So Mama Etiari helps me to organize ideas. And I have about 5 more. Since Dr. Thornton did her presentation. So I've got like all these, so I need you to help me organize all that too. So I hope you can see the genius of this week. Every session is building and building and building. I hope you're appreciating all the work that the staff, I want to acknowledge our staff. I want to acknowledge our volunteers. I want to acknowledge Yvonne Hillman, who is our director. I want to acknowledge our priest of the village, Michael Elam. I want to acknowledge our cast company and crew, our director. I want to acknowledge Lakai Worrell, our director of the Maafa Suite, and everybody. I want to acknowledge transportation. I want to acknowledge transportation is working overtime. I want to acknowledge my executive administrative office. I want to acknowledge everybody, Lottie Dottie, and everybody, all right? So that's tonight. I feel like I'm missing something, but, I know what it is. If you're hungry tonight, I'm not saying that we got it like that, but if you're hungry tonight, I can show you where to go to get some food. Isn't that nice of me? I can show you exactly where to go. Lastly, there are some guests here today. You're leaving before the end of the week. I wanted to offer an opportunity. Personally would like to offer you a tour of Spring Creek Nehemiah. If you are interested, Julia, come on here, stand next to me, Julia. Julia will take your name, and I'll be willing to do that with you at 4 o'clock. It'll be a driving/walking tour of the 2,000 plus units of housing in the Spring Creek section of Brooklyn. That's St. Paul and East Brooklyn churches work together to build. It is 100% affordable to the people who live here in East New York. And I want to share that with you. Hopefully it will inspire you to imagine something for your own community. If you want to be a part of that tour at 4 o'clock, you can sign up today, right now, and then we'll offer the same tour Friday, if you can't make it today, after our session with Baba Wade Nobles. Amen? All right? That's it. We'll see you later on. We'll see you tomorrow. No, one more thing. Wednesday, tomorrow. It is tomorrow, right? Wednesday, tomorrow, Healing Hut. What time? 8:30 is an extended Healing Hut. We will be dealing with trauma, parenthood, and also womb work. With the womb work, we'll be dealing with everything from infertility. We will be dealing with unreleased pregnancies. We will be dealing with, name it, all of it. All of it. Anything that all things that deal with the womb. And if you feel like life and death, right? And if you say, well, that ain't got nothing to do with me. If you came through a womb, it's for you. All right, so tomorrow is an extra special day. We've also hired therapists to be with us as well, who will be on campus to help us work through any issues we may have. Yes, Pastor believes in psychotherapy. Amen. I just wanted to say that. All right, good day. God bless. Don't let anybody steal your joy.